Good afternoon, everyone. Tashi Dele. So today I'm going to talk about dealing with the mind of guilt. Guilt in relation to things that we have perhaps done in the past and that still impacts our mind now, still has a harmful impact on our mind now. So talk today about letting go of things that we've done in the past.
정신 누비 토레 아니 미션다기 지기 생규 누비 집에 토네 강아 영야지 용고래 직디 안주기 소수기 삼는 당당한 토네 마디비 견진네 강아지 니 용고래디 강아 용다로지 대산로 니래
The problems that we experience in life come from two broad directions. One is from the material world. So anything material, that is one direction. So it can be the climate, our body, possessions or lack thereof. That is one area or direction from which we encounter problems. And the other is from our way of thinking, our mind. So thinking in ways that cause us harm. So these are the two general areas from which problems arise.
소수기 대신균 셴리기 찌되는 뇌가 마인바 랑기 삼는다는 토네 다강아 체지 강아디 세야디 디세단기 탑람 간에 삼다나 세다 거야 아니지 시슈여로 당도.
And of those two, we'll be looking at just the one, that of our way of thinking, how that can cause us harm. So our way of thinking, this can arise in dependence on what has been said or done, but it's really about looking at our way of thinking that causes, exaggerates harm that would otherwise be experienced.
밀리아 아니 뇌세체기 뇌세체비기 뇌세체베 직제밤 다 같이 셴리아 직 구마구베 있네다 같이를 돌더나 셴랑기 미셴치리아 뇌세체제 강아제제 안디니기 강아 도시네 강아제야다 다 같이를 도시 노트 중셰베기 녀바징은 둘이야 양시 용고로다.
Generally, regret will arise in relation to things that we probably did do, or maybe regret about something we didn't do, or something about we said, or perhaps something we didn't say that brought harm to others, or just harm to ourselves. So this is a very broad way that we can approach how a regret can arise.
And the Notre-Dame Yongore, that Notre-Dame Yongbaza, and the Chelia, and the Notre-Dame some time, or the Gyovache, or that he did Notre-Dame Sambega, the Gyovache Yongore. Gyovache, Dene, and Delia, and the chick DJ Soyanchik, Sem Makiba, Gangamo Chaji Chagorwada.
So for certain, we all will have done many things in the past that were not skillful, said or done things, for which we then regret arose. But the question really is whether that regret is something then that we can let go of, or if we hold on to. So having done something or said something that was at fault, that happens, that's normal enough. Having regret for that is good, but to hold on to that and cause oneself harm, that is not skillful.
Dadi dinegi gyobaki and sosuki semakiba kanga mongbo chungor de tinga me mongbo yungor and dinegi kangadi and yane and samdade digi kangadi shu cherche roche and rangi and the kidina semakiba chaya Semakibe Kingi, and the Rangi, that in it, Makiba Child, in it, Kala Sayada, and the Jigi Yaposama to a jet in it, and the Jiki Supole and Naniana, so you had it, Ungore. That's also Semakiba Child, then it. Rangi going you Rokodanium do, and the Geshe Yapoche Matovaje, and the Jiki Semaki with them do, and then Pasha Roboti, give me a so that just Taran Shayada, the Nega Gangaji and Jugi Chikmungor.
So to be clear, doing things that are not skillful, that is perfect, while it's not ideal, is perfectly normal. And then having regret for that, seeing that, well, that didn't work out so well, I caused harm to someone else or myself. And having regret then, wishing it had been said or done differently, that too is useful, that is good. But then holding on to that, having it fester inside of us, perhaps for days, months, or even years, this then is not at all skillful. This causes us harm. And when guilt then dominates us in this way, it destroys our peace of mind. We struggle to think about something else. We certainly struggle to have a good time, to relax. It destroys our peace of mind. And it can even prevent us from having an enjoyable time with friends, enjoying a meal with friends, sleeping well. In this way, holding on with guilt about past unskillful behavior, this only causes us harm.
That Gangadi, the Niki, so no to change Yana and sometimes the so Ralia, Chik Gunjia, Tonjon Dia, May Jim, Nipen Norsha, Mape, Gorisha, and the Niki, somebody core.
When guilt is strong within us, so it's not just merely regret, learning from our mistakes, but now it's guilt, then we have these thoughts of what happened going around and around in our head. I wish I'd said this or not done that, whatever it may be. And in this way, our mind is overly dominated by this, and this causes harm.
먼저 삼르당나 돈에 강아요 하리다. 삼르당나 돈에 강아요. 삼르당나 마디비 돈에 강아요 거래. 제사디 강아시에 탑람델라 당아주 지소라 가르치고 그러시네. 디 강아시에 탑람델라야 안에 디 강아시에 돈달라 창동야 당 안에 지금 시멘세알라 소바다 데네게 탑람 비주 다제 데네 소수기 셈디바 꾸부스 Jambameva, Timbumeva, Susan, Dushi December, this Jammed, Jambamedic, and it Hulera child, Leongro, the nigger sometimes, that Dingy Ganga said, and you got a chisola, got a bitch tangerisine, they Ganga Denilia, then Chang Sume Noyala Sobada. Then and Siemens Ayala Soba, Di Pijitangore. Di Pijita did the Ganga say a tablam resum, Pijitangor there, Di Ganga say a tablam chado, Mare, Di Ganga say a tablam di, and you mention 강아세 디강아세 투마레 제가 디강아세 투마 가르선의 창동배는 창동의 라신지 패치 셰발로 제메제비 갑라 아니 제메바서 강아데 메바로 쇼레 이네 창의 뉴버데 예용도 양자 강아체 거래 양자 강아체 거래 아니 시멘세베네 시멘세니 배 셈디 뉴버 메비 갑라 데스 쟁교 말와 야디 뉴버데 예로도 냠로도 양 강아데 야라 다 라자레 거래 제가 데네 참 안디기 데네 시메자 랑창동 대제도 안에 수보를 발교하신데 나네들 된 디가래야 되네 류기 나자들이 홍거래 다강아 두스네 지금 받은 아주 뭐 원세티 거래 제자디 디 탑람 간주 강아 세게 탑람 때디 면주제디다 디 가서 시멘동야 나 창동야 데 대소디 아주 디 강아 세데 탑람디 지금 말에 면주 주제네 되네 강아세 두야요 말에 시멘다 안에 창동의 돈에 디 셈기 강아디 세 두야요 말 두 말에 디 탑람디 노트리.
Well, when guilt is dominating us, the problem is not actually what sparked the guilt, what was said or not said, what was done or not done. But it's this faulty way of thinking that has led to guilt arising, not merely regret, learning from one's mistakes and moving on, but our way of thinking is actually at what the cause of our problems here. Again, not what was said or not said, done or not done, but our faulty way of thinking. But not being skilled in our way of thinking, not being skilled in being able to change our way of thinking. It's common in the world to deal with mental problems is a bit strong, but to deal with issues like this through maybe drinking alcohol, taking drugs, prescription medication, these kinds of ways. So that's very common in the world. And perhaps one has plenty to drink and either gets in a good mood or just passes out, or does the same with drugs or medication. And whilst that alleviates the suffering in the moment, it doesn't resolve the problem, because the problem is a faulty way of thinking, an unskillful way of thinking. And through being unskilled in how we think, not only do we experience mental torment, but it has an impact on our body directly as well as indirectly through substance abuse and so forth. So therefore, it's important to be very clear what the cause of our pain is, and what solutions are not effective, namely drinking alcohol, taking drugs, or prescription medication. They're not effective in that they do not resolve the root cause.
삼노단지 세네 세 투여 여바 직자 아니디 삼노단의 세네 마도 면제다 대지 제반한 현세메데 다디 삼노랑 단지는 디 소소라랑기 삼노단지 아니지 세호래.
Where the solution to dealing with mental challenges lies is to deal with our mind, to become skilled in changing our mind, transforming our way of thinking. Because if the problem is with our way of thinking, relying on something material like alcohol or drugs, this is not going to solve the problem. The problem is solved through changing, developing our way of thinking. The four mistakes that we have made, to have regret for those mistakes, this is healthy, this is good to have.
남도 갈리게서는 오당의 리미도 같이 안에 가랑기 게 노르 제자 앞에 교보레샤 선배게 삼노게야 남노게야 한디 게디 노르 제가 미샹다게 갈이야 오다 미디페 지코 노르 되네 제어서 미 다시 직 갑로는 게 갑로를 시고래 말에 균지 지고를 가 통중 땅고 섬고를 선배게 되네기 남도 기고 소소 미샹다게 삼기 메나 소소래 남도 되네기 되네기 남도 디기 안다 강아지고래 안에 랑 제진이 숙천보라서 랑 제진 오당 헤디네지 앞에 교셔서 랑 배신도 제바진데 제진지는 헤디 제샤 노르 나강아레샤스 되네 랑 제진에 삼로 숙천보여 버려 랑 제진에 삼로 숙천보여 봐제 되네 남도 다마라기 미 현다게 갈이야 통주 땅고 미 되네 갈이 갑로를 시고를 선배 삼로 시기리에 선배 삼로 시기여를 선배 삼로 되네 남도 다마라기 제 되네 아당아 교보레샤 선배 남도 제 노트주 제샤 선배 남도 되네게 삼로 다마라 대수 땅에도 디스 제산 삼로디기 미매바나 직바래 미매바나 직바래 고 띠묵세래 띠묵 삼로 띠묵래 제산 디 미매바 띠묵나지 가마나 디기 간솔에 강아지에 삼로 디수게 강아지고라 간솔에 강아지에 되다.
There's a stark difference between regret and guilt. So regret is healthy. Through regret for mistakes, we grow and we learn from our mistakes. This is healthy. But then when we have looked at our mistakes, regret has arisen and we've learned that how we would have been more skillful to deal with it, we then need to let go. But guilt comes when we don't let go, when we engage in over-conceptualization, when we're thinking about it again and again. It's going around in our mind, and it's going around in our mind with, I did this, I wish I'd done that. And then the judgment comes. I'm such a bad person, I'm no good, I keep making these same mistakes. And also then with over-conceptualization, we have our fantasies about what others must be saying about me. And we have this strong sense of conviction. I bet this person is now talking to that person, is talking to that person, and there's all this gossiping going on. And we have all these thoughts going on and on in our mind. And at the center of them is me, myself. So this we'd call self-cherishing or self-obsession, where this over-conceptualization is all about me, what I did, how bad I am, what others are saying about me, how they're looking down at me. So here we are constructing our own prison of pain. And this entire construction is through this faulty way of thinking, this over-conceptualization, where our mind has become obsessed with what was said and done, with ourselves at the very center of this self-constructed drama. So this is unhealthy. This is what is causing us this pain.
pastor mini de che ki shigebe so so sus tar je pane mini ki shigene da so so lamsan nam do otati di nge ko she nge no ru ji ne jungyo nya ma den che da nga le gyun ju ji ko shi go le san bi so so nam do ki go ko ni pini mi ki shi jan da she de ne so so nam do de ne ki je di thone se ma ji ba cha da an de ne an ya ji dua ba ji so so ngo shi ba de pastor so so de ki shi ma she ba da din dro she ba o da ko nga ga yo ma ni din ne ma no ru che za nga le ya thong jo tang go san bi de ne nam do ki go je sa di ka nga di yong go le je sa di nam do di 남도 지 차상 세고 거다 디 까고 거래서.
So for example, if you've spoken or acted unskillfully towards someone, and then you see that person later from a distance and they're talking to another person, perhaps a third person that you both know, and you see them talking, but you're at a distance, so you can't hear anything. But immediately, if your mind goes to, they're talking about me. They're talking about what I said and did. They're gossiping about me. And then if one imagines, perhaps, one sees their facial expression, and looking at that facial expression, you think, oh, they're definitely talking about me. I can see from their face. Or should one of them happen to glance at you and then perhaps laugh? Now you're convinced that they are laughing at you. When really, you have no idea in reality what's going on. Perhaps they are gossiping about you. Perhaps they're talking about something completely unrelated. But this is how this over-conceptualization, the self-obsession, how this can absolutely distort reality. So I think this is something we all have some experience of. So let's then talk about how to deal with this way of thinking, what methods we have.
당은주 냐마 수수 너를 제바데 오다 뒤징에 너를 지셔 뒤민도 선비게다 교바지 기기로 와 제사다 교바지 완사다 교바지에도 다 너를 가르치 가는 제샤 선비 다 가르치는 제바래 선비 삼다들이다 삼다래 너를 제바디 파 디야네야 등이 너를 제샤 선비게 되는게 삼야네야도 땅나 소소라 판도 두에 민도 판도나 판도 여바이나다 세니티고도 와스 대단 판도 맨나디 삼당고야 개민도 와선 베다 두시네 데니게 삼모디 너트 제바데 야네 야도 삼당바이나 소소자디 판도 녀마도 너트 녀마 제사를 와다 너트 제차차를 베데 다데 말에 녀마 차바래 다 녀마 차교딩에 야네 야도 삼당나 디 판도 두게 민도스 다베 두두시네 삼다제 두 제바제네 삼다제 다 다등이 그 강아 섬야도 지금 남도 다말 두신 강아 섬 소수게 지시 dim도 배상 소수 균지 삼다वे나 셈야 소수 미기우나 강아는 시우 용구도 제산티 강아 용구도 냐마 너를 제교디 매번 차야요 말했다 매번 차야요 말 제산티는 현상 냐마기 네 너를 중앙에 들려 야네 야도 삼다시 다 셈마기와 셈을 빼 소수게 되는 게 삼남도 다마라 삼코도야디 판도스가 민도와서 제자디 판도 민도 제자 판도 매반자 디 만족이 대삼 땅고야 개미도와 디 삼마당 바샤샤베는 가르도 람나 다 삼마당 디냐마 제설게 차차래 제자 삼마당데 다 삼마당제 바샤샤베는 가르요레스나 디 셈남도 다마를 용말레스 제자 남도 다마를 메디 셈냐 강을 치기 말해 셈 강아마 된 남도 다마 셈 마기와 메나 되네 소수게 셈 흘려 차기래 되네 셈 흘려 차바이나 되네 아니 소수게 되지 나신 소수게 조보가 보니번에 계시야래 소수 칼라사야래 아니 레가이나 따따따따 제토바 아니 창다 아니 지금 매 심을라서가 사모와 아니 마고에는 소수수 볼에 많이 바티서 용도와 셈비게 두신의 소수게 남주게 셰럽게 삼당 되네 용도와 셈비 직녀마디 삼마 제바디 다디 안에 야도 삼다나 강아마도 판도 매바디 하고 걸봐. 나 되네게 삼마당와 샤샤베 있나? 얘만 너도 주는 중차래, 다 차차래, 양자 중차차래. 대인자다 디 삼마당와 샤샤나, 아니 강아카이 민도와 디니 두시는 삼다샤베나, 아니 소소랑아래, 디니기 삼다베네, 디니 아니 강아지세 탑람직디래.
So the solution abides or resides in using our wisdom or our intelligence, in thinking for ourselves. So how then to think? So one method is that when one recalls something that one has said or done in the past that you have regret for, again, having regret for past mistakes is perfectly healthy because we need to learn through our mistakes. But when we find in our mind going on and on about this is the point to interrupt this way of thinking, to use our intelligence to thinking. By me going on and on about this right now, is any benefit coming from this way of thinking? Am I thinking any new thoughts? Do you have any new lessons to learn? And almost certainly not. Let it go. Just ask yourself then the question, by thinking about this past event again, is benefit coming? And if there is benefit, then this is a worthwhile train of thought. But when we are ruminating about something, when we have guilt about something, no benefit is coming from this. Only pain. Only pain. So recognize then for yourself that through thinking about this past event, it is not helping me grow as a person, but it's rather keeping me caught up in identifying with some past behavior, seeing myself in a misrepresented way, in an exaggerated way, that I am that kind of person. I'm not that kind of person. Let it go. This was a mistake that was made, maybe many times, but let it go. It does not need to abide with me in the present. All that needs to abide with me is the lessons learned, and let go of this. It's time to let go of this. And how one needs to approach this, the skillful way to approach this is to be light with yourself. Don't beat yourself up. You've done enough of that. Rather, when you see your mind keep on going back to that same story, recognize that. Laugh at this habituation, because that's all it is, and let it go. Be light with yourself. Leave these past events in the past. Return your mind to the present. And you may need to keep doing this, because if the habituation to going back and dwelling on past things is strong, then just recognize it's a strong habituation, that's all. And be light about it. Don't beat yourself up anymore. Let it go and keep returning to the present.
Dondala lu samdanshi, dondala ane nyama samdin nurchwade yane and salmadashi, di sam di ko salmadashi pa jamba jeju de yashore that di jam sammat. Dinigi ganga de yanja samlo koro jidu lamsa dismadan samla shandashi ta je di production du samdana ane di set up jikre.
So this first method then just comes down to this. Leave past mistakes in the past. And every time they come up again, leave them in the past. Let them go.
Because
what's causing us harm isn't actually the past event. It's that it's going around in our head again and again and again. That is what we need to cut off, because that is the source of our pain. So let me tell you a story in this regard. So once, a long time ago, one person was walking along a route and met someone else, and this person was clearly upset about something, and asked if they could tell the story of what was upsetting them, saying, can I tell you what's going on? If it will help, can I express what's going on for me?
And the
other person said, sure, you can tell me if you wish. So you can tell me, but whilst because I'm going somewhere, so we can walk together, and whilst we're walking, you can tell me, and by telling me, I'm sure your problem will be resolved. And by the time we arrive at my destination, this monastery, by then you will know what the answer is to what's tormenting your mind so.
And in my good party, the past to the Lamgarchilo, Todigi Tomore. She did the Danson di Ganga immediately. Colonel Dodi Jashos Lavre. Could Dodi Jasho Larmato, Dodi Jan and Kesho Layomar, Dodi Jaji Pacho de Shasho Galayomar, Kogalas and Dodi Jashos Lavre.
So they're walking along this road, and the person with the tormented mind, the other person says to the one with the tormented mind, oh, there's that large rock there. Can you please pick that up and carry it to our destination? So not carry it, but just pick it up. Can you pick up that large rock?
That love you to meet Corona, some Garcoris, Dodi Jaji, that kin draw with Conim the kin draws a summary. Some didn't quit Dodi Jan and kin already.
So the person thought, oh, I have to pick up that heavy rock and carry it to our destination, to the monastery. Whereas what the person had said was, can you just pick it up? But the person picked up the rock and carried it, again, despite just being requested to pick it up. And anyway, picked it up, carrying it, and said, how far is this monastery? Because it was something quite sizable and heavy. So the person said, with their own understanding of time and space, or not so much further, maybe just around a few more bends.
Then judging pass and the big galley had a taco custom garden. That did don't that maybe judge in the carrier galley down the galley shoot to don't that into the Cowboys could be me do some could do the shash and this put the shash and so on.
And now this person carrying this heavy rock is thinking, why am I carrying this rock? You know, what is the point of this? I'm not going to carry it another step and just put it down.
I go to shash and then Marto didn't drive the color. I could do my shasar. A shy Carson Pinny can Calais do the Calais you don't ask him to and the Calais shoot doing in the shash.
And so the monk said to the person who had now put down the rock, "Oh, you're not carrying the rock anymore." And the person replied and said, "No, it was really heavy, so I've just put it back there a few steps ago."
And then you're only the land the Rasarella, that you're only going to say a problem land the Rasarella.
And so the monk then said, "Now you've received your answer. This is the method to apply to your problem."
She said that Nanga Raver Labna Nidi Dodi Kyola Jajo Lama do Jani Kish Lama Swans. Kyoran Jan Su Ken over this. Don't that never till Kyoran Jan Kid Kaleshu, Kyoran Kale Javas, Kyoran Kale Mongun, the Kyoran Gidi Chevalimato, Nicho Dodi Jash Lamado, Dodi Jan Su Kish Labio Malwas. Just not Dodi Kage Kale, the Kyoran Yar, Kale, Kyoran Kale, Daddy Badu Kale, Kyoran Chevar was. Daddy Dodi Pasha, Shan, Jodi Kale Miduas. She Kale Miduas. Just not the Kyoran to Jas and the Kale Miduas like that.
The monk said, "Yes, now you see the method. All I asked of you was to pick up the rock. You took it upon yourself to go much further than was required and have carried it all this distance. And for what? Now you've put it down and you see how much better you feel. So you made that problem for yourself, but you've also now resolved it for yourself."
Oh, that Dinashi the land the Karasne, Kurang Yama Jungudida, Dojash la the Chiba, Jungudi. Kurayane, Yando San Yana, and some did, Dot Suja Yomba Nashin, Mudu Jan, Sukomba Yomba Nashin, Kurayane, Yando Ganga Digor, Janam Dora, but something Dikayum Gores. That Dotipa Jamotipa Shasha when Ganga Minduas, Dinashin, Kurong, Jan, and some Ganga Namdo Dipa, some Matashi Shasha or Dikanga Yomba, that Lane did this, Kurana.
So your guilt for what happened, that is like the rock. You're carrying it along with you and was serving no purpose at all. Now, if you leave your past in the past, your burden will be lightened and you'll be able to move freely forward with the lesson of your experience as guidance, but without that burden.
These are that currently Yaman Jung Sagudi, Yana, some the Zinje, some Nana Yana, some Dangyo, Namdo Drama, some Dangyo Mares. Just not this some Madame Nekanga de Sigri, said on that Disungora.
It really comes down to letting go of thoughts of the past, leaving them in the past, not having them in your presence, invading your presence, disturbing your peace of mind, serving no purpose.
That these are the Anjugudushna, Semji Gandhi, Semji Samnutanche, Tapi Semji Pa, Samnutan Jevache, Tunikanga Se Huli, Seji, Donadi, that's some Lokidone.
So this then is an illustration of how we use our intelligence, our wisdom, to analyze a situation, to think about how to deal with it skillfully, and to do so.
Yeah. That Geshe Chimbi, Garasungora, Senegazulia, some Danalia, Benengazu Gangash Chevena, that is in as a similar Ganga to Chiniane and some the Ganga Chedu, Chesan Telia, some Dangore, Jebachi Warriors, Chesan Tiganga say, Tablam Karakaritu, Ganes tu, Shimjuchi Jebache, Tablam Yuvaina, and a Ganga de Junga, Ganga Setugre, Chesa, Sim Majuche or Elmare. Chesata Ganga di say, Tablam Tapshi Gune, Mevanene. Digo some down and a Ganga Mado, and Jesus Digo some Dango Maria Sumora, Dondala. This is City Garrison, Galde Jusu Yanani, Della Miga Chishas, Galde Jusu Menani, Della Miga, 지식 팬스 어두 숨고래.
And the great Indian master Shantideva, he also spoke about this. And it's something we covered a couple of weeks ago in our Wednesday classes, where Shantideva said, if there's something you can do about a problem in your life, then resolve it. But there's no need to worry about it. And if there is actually nothing you can do about the problem, well, there's still no point in worrying about it. And this is really very useful advice to apply to your life. So from the 6th chapter, if there is something to be done, why be unhappy about it? If nothing can be done, what is the use in being unhappy? So again, whether there is something to do or not do, then no need to worry, to hurt yourself, to be concerned about it. If you can resolve it, do so. If you cannot, well then you cannot. But there's no need to worry about something.
당한 저게 된다지 갈리 주수 매나니 데라 미가 지자세 지식 판세 디스올 제가 당한 저님만 너도 지교디 제 살교디 다제 중차로 봐 다디 양내 삼단에 님만 너도 중요디 매버 쇠투야 요 말어 와서 제가 디주에게 탑라면 요 말, 님만 너도 중차살에 대바 살이다 다디 너도 마중와서 매버 쇠에게 탑라면 가요 말했어 매반서 니고 삼단에 Sometimes college careers, sometimes Tangoyam, Pandokayo, Mares, the some Gansupe, Semakiva, dinner, no Junja, Semakiva, Jopena, Diginama, Junga Ganga, say to Ribe, Pengiribe, Sine, Pense to go, Mare, Jesus said to whom this dinner, some Magiva, some then the Carapandoy or Pantos came into some Tango Mares or that.
When past events come to mind and are hurting you, just ask yourself, by reliving this experience, reliving what I said or what I did, is any benefit coming? It's not removing this from my history. I said or did what I did. By continuing to torment myself, no benefit comes at all. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't ease anyone's pain. In fact, it only makes me suffer more.
제사단 갈래 주수연 안에 데라 동아지 샤세디 제사 데니 강아지 스님마가 너추르 제제 지게 데리아 셈마지와 강아 차베나 디마 소교 땅에게 탑람도 강아 체 삼로디 매버 소에게 탑람 두에 문도 제바치 제 탑람 여바나 아주 셈마지와 차워요 말레스 제사 탑람데 가라서네 데니게 삼로디 야네 염노 삼 땅마주바 젬바치 파 마젬바치 샤샤바이나 디니 먼저 강아에 마야게 탑람 디레스 제사 탑람 디에서 어디 디니게 삼다제 디니 강아제 가서 셈마지바 제호요 말 제사 디고 디니게 디고야 안니마디 중요다 너도 중 사사레다 판도스 가요 말지 삼다네 판도스 소소 강아 갈레 카로마도 안니직 판도스 가요 말에서 삼다제 디고 삼균에 마다 샤오고레스 마당고레 샤샤바이네 디니 탑람 디레스 제제 디니자 먼저 강아 용마레스 지선 탑람 되네신데 삼당 고레스 다 수수기 셈비 톤에 주비 강아디 셈비 세고 셈비 삼당나 톤에 세고 고레스지.
When past events come to mind, ask yourself, is there something that I can do? Can I apologize? Can I rectify the situation in some way? And if there is, then do so. But there's no need to work yourself up, to be unhappy about it. If there's something to do, then do so. If there's nothing to be done, well, then there's nothing to be done. But again, there's no benefit in allowing the mind to go on and on and on about past events. Let it go. So what we see here is that the source of our pain is a faulty way of thinking. The solution to that then is to rectify our way of thinking. And in this way, by doing so repeatedly, one starts to let go of past mistakes, and they no longer torment your presence. And in this way, one grows as a person, develops as a person, carries less of a burden of our past mistakes.
가르치는데 약보 주변에 약보래 누가 주나 누가 준 사례고 제야 말이야. 안주변에 고나에는 나 사례. 아니 지가리나 균체 준도 준 사사래. 다 가르고서는 뭐바나 강한 마트에 균체 뭐주에디 제체쇼래디 삼당 거야 돼.
The past, this is behind us and should be left there. We learn our lessons and we move forward. And it's this moving forward that is of importance, is preparing for our future. This is important. Dwelling on the past, living in the past, this is really not helpful. It's kind of like thinking about, I had this terrible headache last week and now we're still worrying and making a big deal about it. The headache's gone, let it go. Rather, we prepare for our future by taking care of our mind in the present.
Yeah. Some that day or the jingy motor the team the tango some davin this has had a consugutas kayama. Dama drew you a motor or the tango subside tango says some died.
It would kind of be like you're sitting here now and you're going through the route that you drove to come here, reliving the particular roads that you drove along and what you saw on the road. What's the point? It's finished. When you come to drive again in an hour's time, then pay attention to the road. But you don't need to now.
But I
do want to emphasize this point again, just so it's not missed, that it's important to recognize past mistakes, recognize where we have not been so skillful, and to have regret for them. So this is beneficial to do.
That you get in that you get that the notation say Yana some Tonjon society that the Shinam Dama sometimes the Didigo my Takio Mares. That's some Karatangoras in Yama Notuchu what a hauko, the Notuchu, the Noturation, a team mouse and big team about the hauko in the social Gavaki, teams and Gavaki. That Mahobana or that Tiniki lega dicting a Mahobana out in the chicken may some big this some died Geshe.
So regret is important, but not to criticize oneself, see oneself as bad. This is harmful. So regret past mistakes, learn and move forward. And in this process of learning and moving forward, there is a part that is about accepting yourself, warts and all, as well as making the commitment to learn from one's mistakes and to try not to repeat them. So this is important. We learn from the past and we move forward, leaving the past behind, but taking the lessons from the past with us.
These are some Nalia, Mahombadan in Notre Chigme, some be some of the Yana to Tampa, Notre Shomarwa, Machiko, Notre Shurja, Lamsan Tange, or the Yaguamars, Notre Dile, Sunk of Chigua, Notre Masho, Notre Mashovana, Yajakanga, the Ungo Marwada.
And if one does learn from one's mistakes and commits to trying not to repeat them, then one is not likely to repeat them, and in this way, one's life improves. One doesn't make the same mistakes again, or if one does, one at least recognizes that and keeps trying.
That is not Delia, Geshe Rabten, Karsungora Sene. Jesa Denisungore, never Jungwa Racing, Dala Mene, Gine Yang, Dala Chidi, Mujoa, and the other Chache, Uning Sam. Jesa Dondala, DC or on the 60 down Bochurshana.
There's another verse I'd like to draw your mind to from Shantideva from the 7th chapter. Each time a misdeed occurs, I shall recognize that myself and then contemplate for a long time, no matter what, I shall not let this happen in the future.
Then Yama Jungo to get past some other team in was and Bekivariki some time. Then it's in and the Mombana, Sosugi, and Diniki, that Diniki Jinotu to get Momba, the South in the chicken mess and some Yana and the Dustin and some Tangules, Chizaki Shiwala Chimbe, Dinti Sungo, Labja, Dinji Diniza, Dinicheva in the Mombana, not to show Martin Kanga, Chizadiso, Manzo some Tanga Tone, 레다 두시는 삼로 당고 그래 삼로도 두 장고 그래 삼로 장도를 제바이네 되니 너저 생규 돈에 강하게 세 두그래서
So this verse, and I'll read it again. So each time I commit a misdeed, I will notice this, I'll recognize this, and contemplate for a long time no matter what. I shall not let this happen again in the future. So this is developing a healthy way to deal with the mistakes that we make. Because all too often, we could have said something a little better or acted in a different way. So when we make mistakes, we shouldn't ignore them, but we should learn from them and grow as a person. This is a healthy way to deal with the mistakes that we make. And this is how one develops our way of thinking, by learning from mistakes, seeing what could have been a more skillful way to deal with that situation, and then committing to respond in a more skillful way in the future. This is how we grow as a person. This is the meaning of growing as a person, developing our way of thinking, changing our way of thinking.
어디니게 삼다제 소식이 누리체의 하고와체 교바체 마오바나 딘티자오 있는 지금에 디제베나 소소레 강아리 네 소소 마키바데네 차기도와 안찬레 강아 지고와 선배 삼다야다 지금에 선배 삼다 데 소식이 토네 디니 토네 셴레네와 마체바체 디니게 노트마쇼와체 셴레 펜베르 자와로부터 강투도 지긴 선배 삼다야데 계신거래.
This healthy way of thinking is having an honest look at ourselves and accepting ourselves for who we are. And if there are areas that we need to improve, then this is something to really be positive about, to positive that it has been recognized, and to commit to developing these skills so that one can grow as a person and be an ever greater, make an ever greater contribution to society, to those in our community. So by recognizing where we could have done things better, committing to growing and being a better person of ourselves in the future, in this way we can give more to our communities.
다 답람 니베 삼나야데 답람 니베데 가르 삼나오르제 답람 니베 지쇼로다.
So all of that was one way to deal with guilt, and now a second approach.
다 답람 니베데 가서 삼다야데 다 삼다데 수수기 제바체 녀망이 너를 줘야데 가는 너를 줘샤스. 다파 제바체레 지사다 현기 랑기 현기 현리아 뉴세르 제베나다 아니 지금 뉴스체 등의 뉴스체 상대 간에 제시하 선배다 두시네 다뭐 제바체 삼당거래.
So the second approach also involves using one's intelligence, one's wisdom, and involves trying to transform our way of thinking. So here we look at, so why did I act in such an unskillful manner? What was behind acting in an unskillful manner?
다 삼당에도 제사 다 소수기 녀마 소수기 현리아 뉴스체디 소수기 귤라 뉴스 제비 갑리아 뉴스체 마진예리아 니 콘로사체 콜로 뉴스체도에 아야나 차과계제 콜로 뉴스체샤 야나 나결계제 뉴스체샤 야나 차도계제 뉴스체샤 가르체샤 셈비게 두신 소수기 뉴스 제비 갑리아 소수기 삼노나라 가르코샤 셈비게 삼노딜레 제바체 제사 Gabriel Corolaje and the Mad Sixushia, and Jigman Nusia Jungore, Gabriel Sosugi partially charge in Chabi Wong Nusia Jungore, Gabrielia Soso Beijing, Shuk Chimboda, Benjo Chimboda, Low Chimbo Jen, Naga Chimbo Gage, Nagedi Wong Nusia Jungore, Gabrielia and just partially Chato Cheche, partially Yagi, Yahoo Chavin, Odako Yagi Drosser, Tika with the Sembe Samataji, the Nitone Nusia Jungure, that Kuno de la Tamara Jungure, Cesade, the Niki Nusi Kabla Nusi Chetanti, some kind of Korsha Sebeke, Dushin, Jevasia.
Here, what's important is when looking at, so why did I act or speak in a way that was unskillful? You do not then turn to what it was that set you off, what someone else did or said, but you look at your own mind. Because this is about transforming one's own mind, not about the behavior of others, but one's own mind. So, Did I act or speak in an unskillful manner because my mind was dominated by perhaps anger, perhaps by attachment, maybe out of jealousy or out of pride? So there you look for the fault in your way of thinking. Anger is very clear, but it could be jealousy, where you're competitive with someone wanting to push them down and push yourself up, or it was a mind of pride or attachment, wanting things to go your own way. So here you look at the cause, but you're looking at your own mind. You're not thinking about or paying attention to what someone else did or said, but about your response to that.
안도 samdāyadu sōsūgī nōrū jīgyō tīgī nōsī jīgyō dā tīne nōrchū na jāmbādā dzēwē samlā tāngchīni nōsī chēbā jī yungu wā mārī dā dā mēdō dā kārī yungu rā sīni dōyā chā khuāntrō ngā kia tīne jī chādō tīne kī nyōmō bē wāndu shīni kūnō shī lē tīyā rā chēsā nyōmō bē wāngi kūnī lōng chē āndā tī chē dō wā sīmbē dā tī ngā tī tī kāplā ngā khuāntrō lāng chē tī chē dō wā 디디 갑랑아 차바께 디체도와 디디 갑랑아 나게께 디체도와 디디 갑랑아 차도께 시도와 디디 갑랑이 마신바 니수 마신바 디무 마신베 파저 니수 뭐이 니수 마신바 디무 원게 제도와 선배기 되네 하고도 제사다 다 디디 갑랑아 뇽몽베 샤왕도 송도 샤스 제사 뇽몽베 샤왕도 송을 샤스 제사다 뇽몽베 샤왕 송한테 두신 삼다네 뇽몽베 샤왕 송진이 파저 니수 제도와 선배 삼당 고고래.
So you look there for which affliction spurred your unskillful behavior. So it may have been anger or attachment, jealousy or pride. It may be any number of afflictions. Whatever it may have been, it was not love and compassion. Love and compassion were absent because of the dominance of affliction. So you notice this, that when your mind is dominated by an affliction, it is dominated by wanting things to go best for you. Genuine love and compassion are wanting others to be happy, wanting them to be free of problems and difficulties. But when afflictions are dominant, then you are, and your well-being is at the center of your concern.
아주 예와 마치바 지바 삼다도 거래 제산 녀마에 되지 제산 너트 추와데 녀모바다 되는 아주 가사이데 예와 마치바 지바라 삼 되네기 삼다 예와 체제 제산 당아 디디캅려야 말 라화메도 녀모베 샤와도 소샤 제산 녀모베 되자 콘도 가제 디무게 라화 신 샤와도 소체 말 라화메방이 되네 너트 중도 아니 직강아 되네 제도아 삼백에 삼다요도 안에 가르치오르스네 가사 나랑기 노트지 매바 딩알 라하 매바 니 뇽몽보디기 꾸마체체 알야데 강아 체주 노트 쇼추샤 선배가 삼당 고거다.
So here in the second approach, you are looking at what motivated with a mind preceding your unskillful speech or behavior, and you recognize that it's an affliction. It's not a mind that's focused on the benefit of others, the good of others. So this is important, because then you recognize where the blame should be placed. It's on these afflictions. And you recognize that because the affliction was dominant within you, you had no free will. The affliction dictated your response. When anger had arisen and had overwhelmed you, or attachment to your own wishes being fulfilled had arisen within you, or jealousy or pride, you were under the control of that mind. And that mind, therefore, dictated your unskillful behavior. So this is important, that you then recognize where the blame should be placed.
아니 미디기 아니 칸에 직수시에다 동근 넘겨 두셔 된 발로서 미션대 지고를 라에 지고 수수이나래 배낭 아주 샘진시네 안치 아주 넘긴 직배 나무된 지로 전부 휴지 야고 쉬어베네 가브리하고 콘라에도 아비아다에 소제가 그냥 그래서 콘로 말라네 그 전부 시티기도 하셔서지 라화메 보 콘로 미수도 수이나 샘진도 수이나 콘로랑게도 콘로 디왕기 아니 미딜 라화메바 되네 노르셔야데 용구도 와스 안도 삼다에자다 되네 삼다제 다 너저디 나랑게 너저랑 레미도 때 너저 수치샤스네 내유기 녀몽바티기 제샤스 지사 녀몽바데 빼 너저리 다디미 야고균에 민도 선배게 다 녀몽바데를 견다고 통고거래.
This is really something to take time and recognize that every time you act unskillfully, your mind is dominated by an affliction. It's an affliction that dictates that result. So it could be attachment to having things go your own way, or this puffed up sense of pride, or whatever it may have been. And when you see this in yourself, and you see that it's actually the affliction that is to blame, not you as the person, but that affliction, you can recognize this in other people too. So whomever, for example, gets angry, they then speak or act in an unskillful way. Why? Because they are under the control of the mind of anger. So where should the finger of blame be placed? Not at the person. They are under the control of this affliction of anger. And this is the case for yourself, it's the case for others, it's the case for animals too. So if a dog is barking at you aggressively, we know dogs in general have really kind and cooperative personalities. But this particular dog right now is being aggressive because anger is dominating their mind. And then you recognize what to point the finger of blame at. It's just at the afflictions, not at oneself, not at someone else. It's the afflictions.
내게 삼단제 당한적이 되지 가르 삼단으로서 등에 노르지 당 앞에 교를 상하신 견시우 조사 나세도 소소소소소소야 배직 통총 다야다 소소를 배 견시우 다중에 제거로 와 다디 내게 삼단제 다디 삼단 다디 디디급을 나라랑아미도 차사 녀모비 온거 제시하세데 등에 노트를 지면 나 교보치 차면도 와디 녀모바디 계지 교보 차더라 디디급을 나 세면 상보시 계획는 이걸로 판도 제어요 말에 제사디 미 세면 상보도 야고 차 세면 끼에네 얘는 녀녀바 제어 말에 디디급을 세면 안 받게 봐서 녀녀바 제 이그 되는 노트 중화래 제사디 나라랑아 민도 와디 제사 나라랑아 메바서 되네기 아니지 녀모 되샤 콩르게 술리나가지 여바자 되네기 술리 노트 중그래디 노트 중화데 천이래데 제가요 말해 와서 배가 삼다다 다디 노트 중화데 녀모 온게 주셔데 녀모 받아 야고 민도다 되샤기야라 콩르기야다 나야 차도기야디 라레 네바 셴레 네바 라신 이거는 네마도 라신 차사 강아데기 삼로 디레샤다 디 삼로 디데 균에 계주민도 디메바 소고도 선배 삼다야들다.
To think about this well and see deeply is incredibly beneficial, because then again, to come back to the theme of guilt, when you recall something that you said or did that was harmful, you recognize, I actually had no freedom at that time. For example, let's say you said something out of anger. Because I did not choose to be angry, but anger just spontaneously arose within me, independent of what was said or did, or my mood at the time, whatever it was. Anger arose, and that anger dictated the way I acted or spoke. It's the anger that is at fault. It's not that I am a bad person, but I had no freedom. The anger dominated me. This way of thinking is in accordance with reality. It recognizes how things are. And when you see this, you recognize there's no reason to think, I'm a bad person, I'm not a good person. And to look down on oneself or look down on others, we see this actually makes no sense. When you understand that when the afflictions arise, certain behavior follows, and that the arisal of the afflictions isn't done intentionally, but it just arises due to habituation, then you become very accepting of yourself and others, because you recognize that unkind speech, for example, is just the natural expression of a mind that is unhappy. Nothing more than that. And in this way, by thinking well on this point, you become accepting of yourself for your faults and others for theirs too, and not criticizing yourself or looking down on yourself or others.
Yasa nanganon zuki mi sangbo da mi nganba sayadi mi sangbo da mi yakbo sayadi kari chagorasi mi koron ya sangbo da yakbo sayadi mi nigur duye jine 니고 되게 갑라 미디 상보르베 야보르베 약마레 람나 아니 디 야보레 약마레스 가시 뒤에 가요 말로 니고도 거로 다 미들이야 콩로사죠 콩로사베 쥐봐 콩로사에도 류하게 넘겨 쥐봐 주보도용으로 되어도 니리가라 미디 야보레 약마레 미디 약마레스 라그로 왕저 다 미디야 배 지금 semba상보 신헬리에 팬비게 삼다제 직군론 잠제 삼다 되네게 삼는 계제 아니 신헬리야 도시도 아니 류하게 넘겨디야 지 약보도용으로 계시나 약보잖아 아니 류기 넘기나 약보 된도에도 아니 미디 약보도 레그로다 제가 미디 야다 마야 세디 아니 먼저 가르스는 그런 그 삼문나려 삼문 상보치 약보 끼디나 미디스 약보래 미디나로 삼릉 안바 차다라서 묘모버지 샤원 뒤뒤베 유베갑라 미디 안바래 제가 미디 상당에서디 거의 유군롱 삼로디 이상한에 제디 경기 령하게 줘봐 상한래도 다 미상보다 안바세 이와체 되는 체원마도 미니고도 갑라 곧 콘로라요마 잠제삼메도 곧 미상보를 약보래서 샤시아스감도 제가 당한주 미다 미상한세도 묘모베게 샤완도 주도바네 민한바 미 잠제다 삼로 상부게 샤완도 주도베 미텔라 미상보스네 기와치기도 되네 인자 당한주 미상보를 제고나 가르고고스네 삼로 상보를 기고를 냠는 제고래 다 민한바 냠바지 매바 소고이나 랑주게 안에 차단기 묘모바디기 매바 소고래 제산디 매바 소고래 되네 매바 소바이나 랑기 너트셔야디 용고 말하다.
So if you now call to mind just a picture of some generic person asleep, and then you have in mind a picture of someone asleep, you ask yourself, is this person a good person or a bad person? You really have no way of saying at all. Then you imagine that person awake and enraged. Then you'd say this angry person, are they a good person or bad person? You'd probably say a bad person because they're angry and they're causing harm. And you imagine the same person in a very different circumstance, but acting with kindness and care. And that same person, then you say, that's a very kind person, that's a good person. So the only thing that differs between the person who's asleep, the person who's causing harm, and the person who's causing good, is their way of thinking. That same person, when the mind is inactive, or when the mind is dominated by rage, or dominated by care for others, that same person is suitable to be called a good person or a bad person, or I don't know. So from this, we recognize that the person themselves, whether, again, now we take it to ourselves or someone else, is not a good or bad person. It's a way of thinking that is being expressed. And if someone is acting in a bad way, when they are overwhelmed by anger, but it's not really them. It's just that that person at that time, whether it's ourselves or someone else, is dominated by anger. And likewise, if it's kindness or care, we say, oh, it's a good person. Look how nice they are being. But their mind at that time is dominated by kindness and care. So in this way, we come to recognize that it's actually the way of thinking that determines whether one's behavior is good or bad, not that person. And this is important, an important distinction to make.
지난도 진행한 중에 심주제도 제제바체네 제사님아 너르셔야디 시켜야디 니 녀모바지 녀모 온도 송샤 따팅알이야 라완요 말에 라완메바 녀모바 샤완 소레샤 따 라완미도 제사도 녀모바 샤완 쇼사 라완메바 술리나 너르 연구를 가요 말에 선비게 삼다메나 대sem리야 야네야도 삼다에 강아디 리 말에 제사다 데니게 삼다에 직세.
So in the second method, you're coming to the conclusion that a person's behavior, so physical, verbal behavior, is merely an expression of their mind. So if the mind is enraged, the speech and physical behavior will be an expression of that. There'll be violence, there'll be aggression. If the mind is not enraged, it's calm and gentle and loving, so too will be the speech and the behavior.
데네 삼다 녀모바디 샤완메바 교에는 녀모베 원게 요 직강아 되는 튀겨 봐나 다 몽바나 되니게 뇽몽바지 계주메 다들 라 노트 녀마 노트 중에디 게응이 뇽몽베 왕에 뒤중샤 다 몽바나 된 뇽몽바디 계주베네 몽바네 되는 노트 중에게 녀가 요래 제가 되네서 당이 뇽몽바다 되지때 마 균에 계주메 선배 되니게 뇽몽바 마기야 탑람데 베스자 나야 되래 제가 되네 계주메 선배 삼다 안디토네 아니 펜베 셈디다 콘로게다 디주기 삼노디 펜베 셈샹리아 잠바다 제베 삼다베나 콘로기고마 제가 디네장에 샹리 펜베 삼노디 제와 잠바다 제와디 아니 야네야도 제다 술리네 펜도로 제다 안지 잠제지도가 지인 셈베 삼노디 간주 장도를 시화데 디레 제가 디 제베나 당아주기 라신 그디네 다 Nyama Ganga Junwane, Ganga de Semitone, Ganga Namdo Geshe Ganga Mateva Jikje, a Mahobana, Ganga Diki Mayon, Yaga Mayon, Wongo, Kava, Odusina some died.
The second approach is really to come to recognize the role the afflictions play in harm, so that when one points a finger of blame anywhere, it's not at a person, whether oneself or others, but it's at the afflictions. Then when one sees how these afflictions are not intentionally generated, but they rather arise independent on a vast web of causes and conditions, and in terms of that person, just due to the habituation, we see the grave danger of these afflictions, and we commit to taming our mind, subduing our mind, developing our mind so that our natural response is not an afflicted one, but one of love, care, and compassion for others. And this way of thinking helps us be far more accepting of ourselves and our own faults, as well as accepting of others and their faults. So within this, one commits to no longer criticizing others for acting or speaking in a way that we do not feel is ideal, but rather differentiating the person from their way of thinking. And thereby, we commit to not criticizing others, to not blaming or complaining about others, but rather to hold them as dear. And when we see ourselves or others acting in unskillful ways, rather than judging and complaining and criticizing, hold them as dear. Give rise to the aspiration, if it's someone else, may they gain freedom from their afflictions. And I will do my best not to act in a way that stirs or stimulates their afflictions. And likewise with myself, I will forgive myself for the errors I make, and I will continue to try to not give rise to the afflictions. And if they arise, to not let them influence, not let them dictate my speech and my behavior.
Karine, Namada, Yema Sargutna, Yemada, that Mahombashi, Mahombadi to Narikere, Chesandana, Chisona, Legale, the Chasan Chitia, Chasa, Mahombe Dondalea, and the Legat Jeta, Mahombe Donda to get the Chitin, Chasa did Mahombe Donda Jamada, and Lunyamagi Dondalea, Legally, Yamagi Dondale Chitin, Chihomaro dancer. Karina, or the Mahomba, San Yidin, Nani, Tawachema, Lochema, Jinjik, Dushin. 체시든지 레갈이야 차산 되네 지금 마음백이 된다마도 땅 예마디 예마게 되네 예마게 된다 지고 예마디네 지고도 스비체 체시지 할까요 말과 원티나지레 나도 예마 너를 주변에 중사래 야고 주변에 중사래 다 너를 중사래 야고 주변에 예마 야고 전에 야고 중샤 선비게 소소 가와지 고미야지 너를 주변에 어디 뒤민도 선비게 다 너를 하고 와지 다 마음반데 계시셔도 가서 마음바래 내가 가르치다 마음이 된다 지금 나시 마음반은 가서 강한 마태야 마음반의 소소 기부요야 마음반의 소소 야부 차에 된다라就是삼리 통에 다야 돼 다 마음이 된다 섬다래 마음이 된다 섬다야 돼 당한 주기 마음발라 어디니시나 디시셰바나 지금도 어디니시네 데디니 되차동 호롱 아제 녀모지 내가 제발나 동그 넘주간 바차 데네기 미를 샹다시 전에 채와제랑 너도 차야 되는 용도 와서 진짜다 마음바나 인티니 싸우기는 지금에 네 마음바나 아직 지금에 맞중사게 되네 남도다 말씀단 양강을 책도 마음반티네 삼땅 매선비 두신에 아주 마음반 땅이 삼로데 상보지나 편주 판도 여바 상보지다 디니체 투야기 삼로데 강투的 땅이 뭐바나 안디니기 제 내가 가르쳐배나 바 심죽제바체 디치는 누구도 디치는 랑신이를 펜바가라도 녀바콘 두신이 셔렇게 제바체제 두신 내가 지긴 제자들인자 뭐바나 되샤 콘도 녀목의 상화도 마송화의 지야 선비게 삼다디다 계시셔티려다
So I want to encourage you to let go of the past. Leave the past in the past. That is its place. Rather, take care of your mind, and take care of your mind now so that your future goes well. If you think of the future you'd like to have, everyone wants to have a good future. And how will we experience things in a positive and a wholesome way? Is by taking care of our mind now. So I encourage you, leave the past in the past, and take care of your mind now, so that you can become the person that you want to be, so that you can fulfill your potential. So you make the commitment to let go of anger, attachment, jealousy, and pride, and continue rather to train your mind to hold others as dear, to develop a genuine affection and connection with others. So watch your mind. When your mind is going in a negative direction, let go of that. And rather reframe whatever it is you're thinking about, and reframe it through the lens of that others matter. That whomever they are, whatever they may be saying or doing, they matter. How they express themselves is just an expression of their mind. It's not a reflection on who they are as people. But they matter as people. May they be happy. May I be happy too. May I train my mind to gain freedom from these afflictions.
아디레다 도시에 단내야 데리아니 준지신분을 기시올에 신비게 가르송고라서네 동을 더디에 세미야 동안 이동을 벌기우스 안데 랑게 대와 안티무베 가서 이제 대와 되게 안티무베 랑게 대와 자다점스 제자다 데스송고래.
Third verse I want to draw your attention to by Shantideva is from the first chapter. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. Though longing for happiness in their confused ignorance, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy.
제자다 동아되는 세미야 동아니는 걸 죽세데. 당하는 줄이야 가려서네. 아도 차상이야 동아도 뭐 선비기 동아도 뭐 고민도 선비기 동아데 고해 민도 선비기다 안줄에 삼론을 게디나 디 용고레스 동아.
The first two lines, or the first line, though beings long to be rid of suffering. So this points to a truth for all of us. No one wants to suffer. No one wants to experience any problems, difficulties, or have any unwanted circumstance.
제사다 동안 그거 말다 동안 매버서에게 탑람들라 가르치고 있어요. 동안 니도 니를 뭐 주세. 동안 유 녀모베 디베시단 거래서 제사다 소설야 강한 체사를 섬제 강한 세에 돈달라 즉 콘로게 셴파 셴레 뇌세시야. 샤다 콘솔 뇌고도 콘솔 즉 뇌버 마치면은 고용하는 뇌세서 소수기 제사 랑기 동아지 세에 돈달라 아니 차당 계제 차당의 원기 안데 원도 지루고 집에 콘르기 콘로 왕게 샤나 되세체 아또 소식이 동아세야로 대달라 지 디기 고고를 된자 차과제 차회 원기 원소 제사 차당의 원도 기여도 디 동아 요야 유레 차당이 돼 제사다 고야라 동아제 세게 돈달라 탑람디 차당 비지당이 동아 요야 유디를 비지당이 돼 동아 용고를 했어요.
So the first two lines, though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. So this understanding this well will give rise to compassion, because we recognize that whilst no one wants to suffer, beings continue to create causes for suffering. And what are the causes for suffering? It's the afflictions. So for example, when we are complaining and we are criticizing others, we are just harming ourselves. Our mind is afflicted and reinforcing it by complaining and criticizing. So whilst we are wanting to be rid of a suffering situation, By perpetuating it, by thinking about it and expressing our thoughts, we are just making our situation worse. So the cause of suffering are attachment, anger, and the various afflictions. And the more one is habituated to these, the more one will suffer. So despite wanting to be rid of suffering, beings continue to create the causes of suffering by being under the influence of their afflictions.
지단다 지신이 바데 대화 되게 티무 베랑이 대화 자다 좀세. 세상으로 거에 대화 되고 하르세. 대화 되지 대화 인자다 대화도 주위에 돈달이야. 대화 주위에 탈론 가지 지워선 되지 녀모 바데 티무게 티무 왕게 마신바. 녀모 되기 주위에 탑란데 마신 바지 마신비 왕기 아니 지게 냐 차상 왕도 송제 되네 먼저 뒤 대화 주위에 탑람 따야돼. 되네 랑기 대화 냐 대화 싸워 요 직접이야 동아모 이제 소소다데 셈레를 요에네 근데 소소에 대화데 매바 소소에 거래서.
The third and fourth line in this verse, though longing for happiness, in their confused ignorance they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So confused ignorance here is about being confused about what the causes of happiness and the causes of suffering are. So whilst beings want to be happy, by acting under the influence of their afflictions, they destroy the causes of happiness and just create further suffering.
제사당 하나주기 소소의 디기 구여바 있는 아주 삼로 나네 삼바 삼부치 오래서 그러다 파 삼바 삼부치 파 좀나한테 야고체베네 미수이네 좀나한테 다 기시 야고시에도 연구해서 파 로고야 야고체 되는 셰베네 아니 장부체다 소소의 삼바 삼부치 현재 편바 주베나 미 현대적인 수술이야 소술이야 아니 이셰다 지구르체야 되는데 소소 디기 주고래서 지나다 되네기 아니 소소기 내가 약보체 상보체 소수기 엔지게 장보체도 소수기 바기시시제 마셰베네 어디 그때 되네지는 콘주 연기래서 콘주 연바이나 안 소수기도 나 주고 어래서 제자디 디주고 어래 제자당 안주게 뭐 니수제베네 소수기 디기 용야게 탑람딜레 가르쳐서는 삼로나래 잠제 삼다 현재 편배 삼다 잠제 삼자 현재 뉴스 지금 매선배 삼로 땅 디 삼로 디토네 안 현재 지게 령하게 자와치하다 신 자와 두고 그래서 되네 제반에 디기 용고래서 안쪽에 디마제바제 디기 용고 용하게 잡려야 아니 빼네 현랑기 디기 주에 있던데 현고하다 현랴 안 차도체야 현랴 아니 지게 捐学些呀，先怕嘛念面个，再往大呀拉说吧，都学会呢，这个那东亚用过来是，这个样差不多东亚用过，就是让给电话的没法学过来，这差不多的脑话的是送过来。
Wanting happiness, or maybe I'll read the third and fourth line again. Though longing for happiness in their confused ignorance, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So the way to achieve happiness is to both abandon the afflictions and to do so, to cultivate wholesome virtuous minds such as love and compassion, to genuinely hold others as dear. So here one is encouraged to both abandon the afflictions, develop wholesome minds, which means it's not merely doing the right thing or refraining from harm, but doing so whilst holding others as dear, whilst having a tender-hearted attitude towards others. So not responding or acting in an afflicted manner because others matter. So here one is encouraged to develop this determined attitude. I will not allow the afflictions to arise, and if they do, I will not express them because others matter. I do not want to harm them, no matter who they are or what they are saying or doing. So for example, if someone's experienced success, but it's someone that you despise, I commit to not being jealous. I'll be happy that they've experienced this success, and I'll not be jealous of them, or wish they would lose out because I dislike them. Or if someone's acting in an unkind manner, maybe even causing harm to someone that I care for, I'll not be angry with them. I'll recognize their mind is deluded, and therefore they are acting in this unskillful way. So here what you're encouraged to do is not to merely do the right thing or merely refrain from harm, but to do so because others matter and they matter to you.
Di beju di yakbuje sangbuje ta na ngamba ta ma da se di so su ge kunlo samlo de ra la bare che ta ta ngan ju ge samlo gi ngan ju lyunga ge jawa de samlo ongju che re che ta samlo na la ya pembe samba da ne sa jamji ge samlo sangbuje yo ba ina ne lyunga ge jawa che de yakbuji ko re pemba che tu ko re shen la ra shen ni ge le pemba che tu ko re 다 삼로 내나려야 지금 샤리아 채와치에 녀모베 상원소데 삼로 데니시 켜서베네 류하게 자와디야 냠바준 거래 제자들 류하게 자와디 야하질 조당 상보시 조 소수기 시인로 신바네 연대로 주변에 야고질 비슷 당그래 상보질 냠바질 비슷 당그래 꾸노 셈라래 바래 제자디 만주 류하디서 라자 나신 다 셈디 라자디 비슷 당가 나시래 모자 나시래 아주 류가디 모자 나시대 모자데 가와도 예도 연로도 잡로도 둔로디 모자 당한이라 라래와 어디 모자 당한 나시 아주 셈디래 제자다 셈디 상부 제반에 약보시용 두고래 셈디 되샤 코로 녀모베 샤원소반에 요 두고지용 거래 제자 니 인상 아주 셈리아 삼다 또 수전 삼문나라 제바제 심주제 셈 야두기 야와 체제 셈 엠바 삼로도 파빵 더 매워서야 다 셈상보 삼는데 열게 나야 답람 적을 해서 네 제배는 아주 되게 주야다 동화세에게 답람 뒤지 걸 해줘래.
So the way that we interact with the world is through our body. Whether it's through our mouth, through our speech, through our hands and our legs, in terms of our behavior, or through what we hear and what we see, we interact with the world through our body. So our body is like a tool. So a bit like you could say a car. A car can only does what the driver makes it do. Likewise, our body, how it interacts with the world, is entirely dependent on the motivating mind, the intention behind what we say, how we act, and so forth. So therefore, how we engage in the world, whether we have a beneficial impact or whether we bring harm, whether in our interaction with one individual, whether we bring benefit or we bring harm, depends on our body in terms of our speech and our physical way of acting, and that depends on our mind. So really at the very heart of the impact that we have is our way of thinking. So this is where we need to put our attention at all times, to be aware of the quality of our mind, and that will take care of the quality of our speech and our way of acting, and thereby the impact we have on others. So I encourage you to use your mindfulness and vigilance to be aware of your mind in all interactions, whether alone or with others. And in this way, one can be sure that your impact with others will be one of benefit.
니 세계 탑람디 다 상관서 삼르다 제바체 근데 판도 두개 되니게 야네 삼단의 판도 두개 민도 제바체 판도 매바 있나 녀말에 제차바 차를 제자데 삼르 야네 안도의 판도 매바서 디 삼르 파당 마당제 제주야 돼 계침벌에 삼다 직제 다티 삼당매 삼비게 되네 전로치 되네 삼르 코로 주는 파샤 삼르 샹다 따야 탑시 따야 제 안에 디기 다 디는 녀마 누르지바다 하고 해서 누르다 하고 해서 다 지금 민도 삼비게 교바 요바에서 마음바나 되네게 누르 마셔야래야 아니 삼로나네 직제지지야 돼 계침벌에 해서 당보디 직제 니바델라 다 가르스나 어당 주기 두시네 가디 녀마 강아 체디 누르셔야 가르 주샤 집에 소수게 삼로나라 가르 커셔 집에 두시네 제바 제제 제자 두시네 저 디리급래야 대샤 공종 나게 디무게 샤와도 송샤스 제자 민알래야 라와 민두스 제자디 미당 녀모바이디 야와체제 케바체제 아니 뇽모베 샤원 소바 민갈 라마 노트쇼 마라랑 노트제 미동이 미 네유게 삼로 뇽모바게 디기 라마메 바체도와 지다다 뇽모바게는 라마메 치어데 수이나 용고레스 디디 나 노트티 베둑차스카 레미도와스 지다기 노트 중에 뇽모베 라마메 바춘샤 지다 디네 자데 가요 마레스 다 몽바나 디 뇽모바디 몽바나 노트 마야디다 뇽모바디 용로 지다 뇽모바디 게 마주가데 게침버리샤 아세데 다 디네게 게주메 몽바나데 노트 주기메 삼베게 삼다야지다 디네기 다 몽바나 디네기 셈디기 뇽모바디 도초텔라 가라 삼다스네 셈에 삼보 삼다디 잠지게 삼다야다 디네 삼다야디 아주 게침버리스 디네 제베 있는 몽바나 노트 용고 마레스 지사다 니마게 노트티 중앙에 뇽모베 샤원도 송와인바 하고 용도 안다 셈에 어된 녜디 노트 중에디 앵알이야 한게 노트 침보시면서 뇽모고 옹지에레 샤스베 삼다 다이도 안디 소수게 강아디 총두그리에서 탑라로지 디니디 나도세
So the theme of today's talk was about the mind of guilt and letting go of this mind of guilt. But we can take it really more broadly than that, and all minds that do harm. These we need to let go of. So I encourage you to watch your mind, to take responsibility for your mind, and look at your stream of thoughts in any moment and ask yourself, is what I'm thinking about, is it bringing benefit? Or the way I'm thinking about something, is it bringing benefit or not? If it is, this is something worthwhile to do. If not, let it go. Let it go. There's no need to dwell on past events. When the lessons have been learnt, then the lessons have been learnt, and let go. Rather, turn your mind to something worthwhile. So this is something I encourage you to do continuously. Check your mind and see where it is. If it's somewhere on something worthwhile, keep it there. But if it's in a negative, somewhere negative, let go of that way of thinking and turn your mind to something positive. You can, for example, think, in the same way that I'm letting go of harmful thoughts, may all beings let go of harmful thoughts. In the same way that I'm wanting to be happy, may all beings be happy. And in this way, make your mind positive. And then secondly, when you observe harmful behavior, whether it's your own harmful behavior or something you see elsewhere, remind yourself it is never a person who is doing this. It is rather merely an expression of their afflictions. So this you need to see within yourself first and see it clearly, and know that in this sense you are not to blame for speaking unkindly or acting in an unkind manner. Rather, you are lost to your afflictions. They had overwhelmed you and deluded your mind, and therefore you acted or spoke in a harmful manner. The only thing to point a finger of blame at is those afflictions. This is the case with oneself, and it's the case with everyone else. So this really needs to be taken to heart so that we recognize that no one, under any circumstance, or for any behavior, is to be criticized or blamed. What is to be criticized or blamed is those afflictions. It's those that cause harm. There's no need to even criticize someone for not having tamed their mind, because no one wants to be afflicted, no one wants to be deluded, but rather they are blind to the faults of the afflictions. And in this way, they keep creating the causes for suffering despite wanting to be happy. So this is important, because in this way, by really recognizing where the fault lies, you will not criticize yourself, you'll not look down on yourself, nor criticize others or blame others, but just the afflictions. And when each time you recognize the fault of the afflictions, particularly whether you see it in yourself or in others, the outcome needs to be the same. That oneself commits to abandoning the afflictions through seeing the harm that they do. And one can develop the aspiration, may all beings gain freedom from the afflictions. In the same way that I'm recalling the fault of when I was angry, or seeing the faults of someone else's anger, may I gain freedom of anger. May all beings gain freedom of anger and turn your mind in a positive direction. May we have loving kindness towards others, hold others as dear. So in this way I encourage you to let go of all harsh thoughts, all negative thoughts. They serve no purpose other than to cause pain and suffering.
미지 창도 라신디 베갑리아 라신제 미지 직기시 주라 셰베나 미들이야 콘생마로 어디 곧 가야마 코라신 주레스는 고노르시나 콜 공부지기로와 고가선 콜라랑메 바라신 디기디기레스네 미들이야 공부지기로 어디나시 더 소식이 노르주도 오당에만 요몽의 상황선데 진노르 제샤세데 미디 노르지교디 요몽의 상황선 레도와스 세상에 나랑이 끼 미도세베 소식이 소소하를 공부해야 되다 소식이 공부도 어당아랑 끼 전부 미디 끼디 나랑이 제교를 미도 가서 디 요몽의 상황선 레샤세 소소소게 랑이야 공부해야베나 아니디 야네야노 삼다 강아테 되고 말와.
Something I mentioned earlier is to have a light approach, to not take things that arise to your mind too seriously. Just like if you have a light approach and you see someone who's drunk and talking a whole load of nonsense, you'll recognize what they say has no real value. It's not particularly important because it's just an expression of this mind that right now is crazy from the alcohol. So likewise, whether yourself or others act in unskillful ways, recognize it's not the person, it's just the afflictions. The way that you or someone else is acting is not an expression of who you are as a person, but of the mind that is afflicted. And therefore, let go of critical thoughts to yourself or to others, but rather hold others and yourself as dear, seeing that all beings matter, and therefore to be held close.
어디에다 삼단하게 더는 두지는 아주 강한 시고를 내지 준주고 되니 직대게 담아지 차상한 삼단 강한 되는 텐에 삼단에 되는 땅고에서 삼단하 시고를 딩한줄 판도해 봐시래.
The verses I quoted and the whole theme of what we spoke about today was the need to take care of your mind. By transforming your mind, your lived experience will radically transform, as will the impact you have on others. So thank you. Then we can conclude there. But if you have any particular questions, then you certainly can ask. Sure.
So, with the place the blame on the afflictions that arose, not on yourself, where does accountability fit into that?
So with placing the blame on the afflictions, not on the person, where does accountability fit in? Yeah.
지나다가 좀이 지금 미제 삼다들 미 긴고 두고로 하다 긴고 두탄디 간스 두고레세네 나로 삼도 다다도네 두고로 하다가지네 제산 삼다 마디 원자다 삼다나 지금도 세대 교인지 삼다나 마디 바디 고로 하다 내가 삼다고로 되니게 되디로와 근데 뭐라디 야고 줘다 말아서 뭐라지 미질 답는데 뭐라디 키양을 답 선생 요다시야요 말아 순시어서네 뭐라 당한데 시고로 디나신 두시는 아주 삼로 돈에 제바 제제 가리 간스 괜찮대 간데 용구도 무슨 비게 니수다 하고 진짜 삼다데 안주 두시는 삼다노 땅에 돈에 규제 따야 돼 되는 삼다고 그래서
So in general, we certainly have responsibility, but here we can only be as responsible as we are in accordance with our skills and our capacity. So where our skill and capacity is limited, so too is the expanse of responsibility that we can be expected to fulfill. So it's about looking really at where the fault lies. So if you see a car veering all over the road, veering all over the road, you know it's not a fault of the automobile itself, but the driver. Then one would need to also determine the driver's level of skill, or maybe if they are having an episode and therefore they're not really in control of themselves. And then if you recognize that they are perhaps having a medical event and therefore the driver's not in control of themselves, it all makes sense. So too then, if one hasn't developed much control over the mind, but just whatever comes up comes out of your mouth, then in that way you recognize that individual or yourself, there isn't much responsibility. You aren't really responsible in the sense of you haven't developed any skill yet. So therefore, skill needs to be developed. And the blame needs to be placed on just the afflictions, not the person. Is that a little clearer?
I think so.
If not, then ask.
It's like when you develop the skill, but like if you've materially harmed someone or emotionally harmed someone, once you've developed the skill to recognize, okay, I was affected by these afflictions, what's the Buddhist process of apology and asking for forgiveness? Where does that fit in?
Yeah, so then where does apologizing and asking for forgiveness then fit in? When you've recognized that you have done harm.
Di pasho de la lab go de me do de yure da pane labna digu yobena ne labna hayo mare jijine labna ya jigel kama manga de ade yon si ba de jisa dine za dine gi ya ji inji minji la ko me no so samlo na ya oda di ti ma so be ki da ti jikje shana di go ba da.
So, as you pointed out, you recognize the point of fault within yourself as being your afflictions. So this afflicted way of thinking, which isn't you. It's just that you're habituated to think in that way. So this, in terms of dealing with your own errors, you can forgive yourself in the sense of, well, there's a better really is be patient with yourself. In that, I didn't mean to be like that. It was rather just my afflicted response. And then in terms of whether to say something to the other person or not, here you use your intelligence. Will it be beneficial to say something? It may well be, and then do so. But depending on the circumstance, you're not obligated to. If it's going to make the situation worse, then say nothing. And really it depends. So if it will help, then apologize, and apologize sincerely. If it will make the situation worse in some way, then better to say nothing. Sure.
I just wondered with trauma, in terms of how we would deal with that in terms of processing it, because it's instead of being able to let it go, there's this element of where it's the memory, the invasive memories are written in physiologically and viscerally. How would Geshe suggest to be able to process that extent of afflicted mind?
Okay, I'll try then about trauma as opposed to guilt. But I don't have another word for trauma, so I'm going to then have to explain this, yeah? So then I will have to say that where something that's happened in the past is now dominating your mind, kind of like guilt is, but it's also having a negative impact on your body. So what can Geshe say about letting go of this? So the trauma is something that would have happened to you, right? Like that. And so then how can you let go of something that's happened to you? Like this? Because I need to explain it without the word, because I don't have a word for it. Yeah? Okay. Roma Shimpe Nala Nursum, Pena Loma Narangi Betanjisa, Pena Roma Kola, and it's Unkana Yode, and the Gami, and Nasha Tangidan Rabo. Anyway, Kadina, Yamanetium, Jason, Yamanakadina, Penursum, then he sent Penursum, then he Shukla, Nursumani, Shukla, Nimaninga, Nurgi, and Rabo, and Supon Nurgi. Then he Roma Kyunde, Kandus, Kanpigide, Bangides.
Didati Chipare, Mishandagi, Susula, Niman, Yosuchi, Kangati Geshua, Kangati Kangashu, Nyovena, that thing as that thing around the Yane Yando, some dance in a Kanga, some Tavade, did not read. Because a Disheva Chipare, Chesa, Nyama, did you Michandati, Kangati, Bekablan, Kanga, Yon, Kanyo, Tikanga, the Yon, the Tarsarwada. That day, Kablanyama, didn't chase on meeting all the 1,000, didn't number Maraki. Given that's similar Kangashu, which didn't do Sine, Neran, Tonso died, Kanga, the Tigor water. Di Kangan Teddy, that Yama the Sarsare, the Shevanashinda, Sarsare, that some Danga Donna, and that Yan some Donna, Yama Kanga Junior, say to your marriages, didn't that, cause some Dango, Binduas Medi Jumten, Dango Shevadi, landed Arachagore. Then a Niba sometimes. The careers and the Jumsini Sheva the Chagore. Just that mitigating the Kanga Jeva, that's a Malia, the Penzo, Zamra Sheva in the Zatavan, did you Midilia, the child say new the whole Miller Hoyama, the child knew the Dinsetting Alcheva, Middle Hoyama, that means Ninja, that Bekanga chicken, the Nicton, the Chevas, Middle Ninjas and Bendigo combiner, Middle Corner King, but the Yaksho did it at the Tablamdi.
So whether it's assault or guilt, it's really what differs is the degree of the strength of it, the severity of it. The thought, the way of dealing with it really is the same. So I mentioned these two methods. So the one of recognizing that what's in the past is a past event. It's only present in terms of the degree that it is consciously or unconsciously recalled. But by thinking about it again and again, this does not help in any way at all. So to let the past go, and rather to try and grow through the situation and move forward. And that was the first piece of advice given earlier, and then the second piece is also relevant in terms of recognizing that the perpetrator of harm did so under the control of the afflictions. So even in say, sexual assault, there the person was overwhelmed by whether it was desire or whether it was sexual desire, or whether it was a desire to control and dominate, whatever it may have been. It was that harmful way of thinking that was dominating the person so that they acted in that way. So that person at that time, although they were causing harm, they themselves were suffering under the influence of their afflicted mind. So here too, we are differentiating the person from their afflicted way of thinking. And then when you recognize that person was suffering under maybe I can say trauma of their own afflictions, eventually one will be able to have compassion for the perpetrators of harm. So then in brief, the way of dealing with trauma is the same as what has been presented. Letting go of the past and doing one's best to move one's mind to the present, and differentiating or distinguishing between the person and their way of thinking.
Yes, it's okay. Yeah, that is hard.
I'm just wondering about the aspect of trauma where the experience is actually relived viscerally in the present, and physiologically it's sitting apparently in part of the brain that doesn't process as we normally process?
미디기 누거에서 삼나다다 누거에서 디 캬와초라 미디기 누거는 다디 미디기 가에게 탑람디 나고 장딩이 토니 호랑 지금이 직 년도 바시에다 가르나 지진에 곧 탑람 세 탑람 지어와 단 되네기 미디 누버디 야네 야도 소수게 삼노 코르제 소소 강한 체대 바인데 대지디 삼다다 데리야시.
So in terms of the actual event, if there is benefit or benefit in, say, going to the authorities and so forth, then that should be done. Because in terms of whether one is being harmed now, physically or mentally, the harm now is all in one's mind, in that the event is a past event. It's not actually happening now. But if there's help in going to authorities, that should be done. But in terms of where it's impacting on the mind, then this needs to be dealt with in the ways that's presented. About what arises in our mind, about not holding to that too seriously, but seeing it as a arisal of past events. It doesn't have to be in the present, it's rather just a ripening of past events in the mind.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.